Or even if you do it 10, 15, 20 times, each time feels different. And ideally, each microsecond as you're moving through starts to feel different because your body is changing. You are changing as you're doing that.
Hmm.
And so at first, if you're not bored because your mind is still busy trying to think, oh, I have my arm needs to be there, I need to lift, I need to drop my shoulder, I still need to breathe, and then oh yeah, then my arm can come down, and oh, I have to bend my legs, and all of that chatter prevents you from fully being in there. But we need that phase to, okay, now I understand enough of the movement, then I can become quiet and ah.
Fabrice, welcome. It's good to see
Thank
you.
you, Mark. Good to see you as well.
So, Fabrice, you've had the rare opportunity to study privately with Professor Lin Housheng, the creator of Taiji Qigong Shibashi.
Mhm.
How did that relationship begin?
Hmm. Um, it was a bit of a stroke of luck. The story is a little extended. So basically, my first Chinese medicine and Qigong teacher, François Caron, remembered when he was starting his training in the late 70s, early 80s in France, he saw a video of something about China and the development they were doing in that era. And within the video, there was this guy who was moving chi and doing chi emission during an operation when somebody was getting their throat open and remove a tumor from their thyroid gland.
Yeah.
And that's kind of a glimpse that he caught from within that video that had a lot of different explanation. And he was like, oh, I want to learn that. And that was, early 80s, like 83, 84, something like that. So fast forward when I first met Francesco in 1997, taking the Chinese medicine class with him, and studying the school he was running had a heavy structure of qigong included because the treatment modality we're doing was I don't like using the word acupressure because people tend to have a certain idea of what it is, but basically stimulating acupuncture points through maneuver and gaining similar effect as acupuncture would, but manual stimulation of the points. And so in order to do that, you needed to have a certain level of qigong to be able to influence the qi and all of that. And so throughout those courses, every now and then he would talk about this aspect that he had seen and to kind of show the possibility of qigong. And I studied with Francesco for probably close to 20 years. Yeah, almost 20 years, just until the point where I moved to Mexico. So during that time, we often talked about it. And around 2010, when the internet started to be more of a thing and people were posting videos and things like that, a friend of ours found the video on Youko, which used to be more like YouTube originally in China, not
Yeah.
the selling video platform that it is today. So at the time, she kind of found the link and sent it to us, and we're like, "Oh, is that the guy you guys were talking about for Chi Mission?" And we looked at it and was like, "Oh, that's it." And so fortunately, we had his name in it and started to look online, and every now and then would go on Google and type his name and see if I could find something about it. And whole and behold, around I think in December 2010, there's a brand new website called linhousheng.com that came up. I was like, oh, let's check it out. And I looked like, oh, that seems to be the guy we're looking for. And so I sent out an email, and Ling Ping, Professor Lin's daughter, answered to us. And so we started to exchange email explaining why we wanted to meet Professor Lin, understanding the Qigong anesthesia and all of that. Uh, at that time, both Francois and I were studying under Bernard Shannon, who's a student of Jerry Allen Johnson. So we were doing that layer of medical Qigong that's fairly popular in the US. And then we were interested to hear more about that side of the research that Professor Lin did, because we had seen from those videos that he also did some scientific research on trying to measure some level of what chi emission was. And we can come back to that a little bit later. And so with the exchange that we had with Ping, she was doing the translation, exchanging with her father, and so they accepted to meet us in September of 2011. And so we ended up going to meet him, and as we meet, the general sizing out, you meet someone, you talk to them, you see how things are going. He asked to see a little bit of our Qigong, what we have been doing so far, and we're talking about some of the medical Qigong, Qi mission stuff that was really the main reason we wanted to meet him. At the time, we knew he had created Taiji Qigong Shibashi as a system, but we also knew that was not the system he used in order to build his skill.
Right.
So his skill were built before that, and then he created that for the general public. So I was a little bit surprised to see two Westerner coming to see him and say, "Hey, we want to learn what you did before you created what made you famous."
Right. Right.
But he was very open. So from there, when we met him, we were in this kind of communal room of the apartment building he was in. And then he brought us to his apartment to watch a video of different, basically a big documentary from the 80s about all sorts of Qigong, which included the scientific research that he did. And so the scientific research, when he did them, which was in the late 70s, so right after the Cultural Revolution, once Mao was gone and the next person took the place, they were like, well, before we throw everything traditional, let's try to do some more modern research and see if we can understand it a little bit better and see what really has some validity and what doesn't. And so the research they wanted to do with Professor Lin was actually to measure Qi emission, see if they could measure some. And because the training that he had done, which came from a Shaolin system called Neijin Yizhi Chuan, the one finger Chan from the inner strength Shaolin system, was also dubbed sometime the fire palm of Shaolin, because as you do it and as the Qi starts to grow and reach your hand, they get hot, really, really hot. And so some of the Qi emission people can feel that warmth opening up the body and so on. So they used a infrared detector, which is a different type of technology than what we know today as infrared camera. Infrared camera tend to measure the temperature of a surface. That machine was a detector of infrared wavelength. So a little bit different in the way it functions. And so basically through that emission, his hand was about, was it a meter away? So a bit over 3 feet. And when his hand was just hanging there, there was nothing that was detected. And then as he started to build up, bring the Qi and start to do the emission, then you could see the kind of the writer on the old machine, because it was like a paper passing through, and just almost a seismograph type of machine was measuring. It kind of kicked off and it stayed wavering for a while with a very particular pattern that repeated itself. And he did that for about a minute, and then he stopped, and then the needle just dropped again. And so they had this kind of measurement of a modulated infrared wave that could be measured from a distance, which wasn't present if other people were just like tensing up their hand or trying to do something. And from there, that's where he decided to push his research, because simultaneously you had acupuncture anesthesia that started also in the mid-70s, where they were using electrified needle, and Professor Lin, seeing what they were doing with electrified needles, like, well, if they can do that with needle, we can probably do something very similar with Qi emission. And that's what led him to do over 40 operations in the span of the 80s and 90s. The simpler one were basically like a removal of a tumor on the thyroid gland, which lasted about an hour, hour and a half. The heavier one, which he did, I think either 4 or 6 of them, were stomach ablation, so removal of part of the stomach. And the longest one lasted up to 6 hours. So that kind of gives you the idea of the length and intensity of Qi emission needed for that to happen. And to be fully transparent, Professor Lin clearly said after that 6-hour operation, I had no voice for a week. I was really drained and tired. So it was clearly never his intention for Qigong anesthesia to become a thing. It was all part of the scientific research to say, hey, there's something there. we can use it to do that. So there's no doubt that it's not just, purely imagination that, oh, we're hypnotizing someone or just making them think that they don't feel anything, because your abdomen is open and the doctor is cutting off part of your stomach, you're likely going to feel it even if you believe it's not there.
Right.
Um, and so I know you've done a lot of meditative practice and work like that. So I'm pretty sure you had that sensation when you drop deep and you get this kind of bright light in your body almost dissolve. So my understanding is his chi emission had enough strength to maintain the patient in that type of level where
Mm.
they would not feel what was going on in their body, and was also supplementing whatever chi loss was happening from the operation. Some facts were that the heart rate remained normal, the blood pressure remained normal, so the body never went into shock, never reacted to the operation. And also something that was very interesting is the recuperation time after the operation was very short compared to normal standard for similar operation. So the benefits of the chi emission, and again, most of them were, thyroid gland that were removed or removing tumor, goiter, things like that. So they weren't all, big operation of the 40s. So
It's
those smaller ones were
pretty
easier and more
extraordinary.
benefits. It
Yeah.
is, yeah.
And I think I mean, it seems obvious that the reason for the quick recovery is because none of the vital essence and the vital energy was down. So the heart rate didn't get taxed, blood pressure
Uh-huh.
didn't get taxed, cellular health probably didn't get taxed, the mitochondria, and the only thing that got taxed was, Professor Lin, you know,
A
but
little bit. I mean, the longer one was the one that really
yeah,
taxidated. The hour and a half, he never said that he felt any issue
yeah.
from them. So, yeah.
A lot of Qigong, I've also, like, I've also trained in Qigong for a long time. A lot of the masters say, not all of them, but many of the masters say that it's universal energy they're getting from the ground and the sky, and we're the conduit between, right? That it's
Mhm.
running through. So you wouldn't be actually using your own energy, your Qi, but I can imagine just the physical stamina of needing to concentrate and stand or even sit for 6 hours and concentrate on doing something and using the yi to lead the mind and intention would be taxing enough, even if that
Mhm.
weren't the case. Yeah.
Yes. I would say one thing that become clear once you start to do a lot of chi emission is that even though the majority of it is what you're emitting is not your own, because there's kind of two school of thought in that.
Yeah.
There's the school that say, yes, you want to develop what we call in the system the full macrocosmic orbit, the ability to connect to heaven and earth and have that
Mhm.
energy move through you. But in order for that to happen, you still need, as you said, there's a level of you that is present and need to do that. So short emission, not too much of an issue. Longer emission, especially to that level, will still take part of you.
Yeah.
Um, and versus, just to finish my full thought, the other school of thought where are people who build it on Tien, use it as a battery, fill it up, empty it, fill it up again after, so on and so forth, is a little bit of a different method, which they'll usually keep it a lot shorter. It can sometimes be, some people say it's stronger, the effect. I can't really say that I found that was the case between the people that I've met, but I haven't met all of the masters that do that, unfortunately. That would be nice. So my understanding is based on the people that I've met.
Mm.
But yeah, so that training, that ability to get the chi from heaven and earth to pass through you and to emit it, still has its limitation up to a certain point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What was the instruction like with Professor Lin? So when two foreigners come in, they're like, "Hey, you're so famous for this, Shibashi exercise, but we want the stuff that gave you the skill." You see all these infomercials for people like who are ripped and in shape. They're like, "Take this supplement and use this one piece of equipment. You can look like me." He's like, "I want
Mhm.
to do what you did before you got that supplement and the thing."
Yeah,
So,
exactly.
I mean, I'm sure he appreciated the gesture, and probably nobody else
Mhm.
asked him.
Mhm.
Um, so, I mean, was he open with the training with you? Was it all
Yes.
through like, watch and copy, or was it through lecture and discussion, or feeling?
Hmm. So specifically for the Chi mission, was very candid about it. I think we learned the whole method in about half a day, because in itself is pretty simple. Can Professor Lin is somebody who synthesizes information to their core and give you the essence.
Mm,
So from the Shaolin system is fairly well known. Professor Lin's teacher, who was the monk Ke Shui, who brought this system to light in the 1950s in China, outside of the monastery when he left as a monk. When he entered as a monk, he was the one who was selected to be the next practitioner or leader of that particular training. And in his 30s, his parent he was the firstborn child, so they wanted him to continue the family lineage as well. So he left the monastery afterwards. And because of all the changes happening in China, he decided to go out and share that information. So he had about 30 fairly famous students. Professor Lin was one who became one of the most famous. He had a few other who also went on and kind of developed their own system. Some others stayed purely in the Shaolin tradition and continue that lineage, including his own two sons later on. And so, with the knowledge of what the system was, even though we know today that the monk didn't teach exactly the same way everyone, Professor Lin just kept kind of what he considered the main three exercise for it. So learning three downs one posture is relatively short. There's not too much to learn about it. It's fairly quick, but it was like, now you got to go and do that 3 hours a day for the next 5 years, and we'll see where you're at after.
right.
Um, so yeah, it was very simple. And I would say the most intense part of the training is doing the base posture at a 90-degree angle, which Professor Lin used to do for 20 to 40 minutes,
Wow.
with the feet about shoulder width apart, which is immensely more difficult than the typical Mabu with the feet very wide, which I would say when I started, 1 minute of that low posture and the narrow stance was difficult, versus I could easily do 3 to 4 minutes in the wider horse stance without
Yeah.
being something that I would train normally, because I kind of played with both to see how it would go. So that lower posture is kind of the key to really build the intensity, but you learn to do that. And then the other two posture were one variation to develop the sword finger. So you had more of a directed chi emission through the finger. And the other one is what he called the dragon eagle, which kind of build the spiraling
Mm,
movement of the chi through the palm. And is a bit more intense because you're basically keeping 100% of your weight just on one leg while the other leg is extended forward, with just the big toe kind of touching the ground.
yeah.
So a bit more intense as you build up. And his instruction where you do 1 year of the first one, 1 year of the second, 1 year of the third, and then you just keep going.
Wow.
Um, so it was like, it's not difficult. You just have to do the work and see if your body will build up the ability to do that.
It takes
Um,
discipline and plenty of faith too, right? Because
yes.
who's going
Yeah.
to want to spend a year in one posture? That's really hard, and know that they got 2 more years ahead before anything's
Hmm.
going to happen. Whereas if you do the 18
Mhm.
exercises, you're like, hey, I'm on number 6 now, and you got a
Yeah.
little bit of a progress report.
Hmm. Yes.
Yeah.
I wouldn't say nothing happened before 3 years. You
Yeah.
definitely start to feel a difference, but um, it's a little bit like, oh, let's not say that. It's when you start playing a sport. You
Yeah.
can get relatively good at it when you play with your friend, and then you become the better of your little friend group, and then you start to join a team, and then you realize there's a lot of good amateur player out there. And if you really want to make it to the major league, you got to train and develop. And I see the level of using Qigong therapeutically similar to a professional athlete. You
Hmm.
can't be a professional basketball, baseball, football player and train an hour a few times a week.
Yeah.
That's not going to work. You need to build it up. You need to develop your skill and maintain it every day, and have a few different type of training so that when you play the game, all of your skills are well rounded, and you can use the chi mission, you can use the teaching of movement, You can use your, as you're doing yourself the movement to teach them, your own chi is supporting your student as they're going through. So there's that layer of direct transmission, which was clearly the strongest teaching skills of Professor Lin. So
Mm.
doing the movement with them, um, feeling how the chi was moving in him and feeling that kind of wave supporting you as you're learning, it's like, oh wow, that's very interesting. And then you go back home and you try to do the same. It's like, that doesn't feel the same. There's
Right.
something that's not there.
The
And so
training wheels came off.
exactly. So I was like, oh, I guess I'll have to work in order to get there at some point.
Yeah.
So yeah, you were kind of asking that question of how Professor Lin taught, and I think he was very, I don't know if curious is the right word, but very interested to see two Westerners showing up, especially
Hmm.
that we ask specifically for the Qi mission and the Qigong Anesthesia and what build his skill. And so over the following few years, every time we were coming back, it was also a little surprise that we were coming back. It's like, oh, you guys want to come back and learn again? Okay, what do you want to learn this time? Because what I understood over time is that in China, he was in Shanghai. He worked at first. He studied at Shanghai Sports University. He became a swim and wushu coach. During the Cultural Revolution, he ended up working as a in a high school a little bit away from Shanghai. And when that stopped, he came back and started working again. And they built the Shanghai Qigong Research Institute, which is part of Shanghai University of Chinese Medicine. So at first, Professor Lin was managing the medical Qigong doctors of the institute before he became the director of the Shanghai Qigong Research Institute entirely for over like probably close to 2 decades before he left China, ended up started living in the US when he retired. And so during that time, his main work was not so much to teach as to run the whole institute. But because he was so famous and he kept developing other form within Taiji Qigong Shibashi, which the system now has a total of 8 form, with the last one has been designed or made public, I should say, in 2010. Whenever he would go out of the institute to teach, he would have crowd of 500 people, was like the smallest crowd he ever thought. And the biggest one was one of his trip in Malaysia. There was about 10,000 people that were
Wow.
there. And we also have to keep in mind this is in the 80s and 90s within the Chinese community. So everybody is doing some level of Qigong or Tai Chi or martial arts. So the general core knowledge was considered to be somewhat understood. So whenever you would go out and teach, you would show the basic and the very traditional Chinese ways. Okay, now you understand that, just go practice and let's see if you figure things out. So he was kind of surprised to have people coming back and constantly asking him questions, trying to refine their understanding of his own system. Because he had, I don't know, very, very few amount of people that were close to him and wanted to learn in depth his own system.
Yeah.
Yeah. So every time we had question, we often had, the day was like, we start, we learn part movement, a few movement, we sit down, we bring our own question from the study, from the material we saw the previous time, we discuss about it, then we go on and move and learn another part and then come back. So we had a lot of that kind of back and forth between, I would say it was about 50-50 practice and then very casual discussion. We were sitting in couches, talking, asking our question, discussing. And he was always very, very open-minded into sharing all of his knowledge.
Yeah.
I remember showing a clip of one of the last time I got to see him to a friend of mine, and we were basically doing a review of everything we had learned with him, and I was asking my refined question because that was in 2017, I think. So, 5-6 years after learning all this stuff, and I wanted to review, making sure my understanding was still good. And at some point, he was talking with his daughter, Ping Lin, and she was always there. She was the one doing the translation for us. And unfortunately, I don't speak Chinese. That's something I've missed in my development. And Professor Lin only speak Chinese and never learned English himself. So it was a very also intimate kind of environment, very family. Ping being the one that always does the translation. She lives away from where her father is, so whenever we would come in, we would pay for a flight to come, and they would give her the opportunity to spend some time with her father at the same time. So there was this very family kind of feeling when we would get together. And so at some point he was talking and I was asking a few questions. We were in break and he started laughing and look at Ping and he's I I'll paraphrase because I don't remember exactly. He was like, I was teaching in front of a few hundred people and nobody ever asked me these kind of questions. So it's interesting to have these guys around.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Nice to
it
have
was
a couple
very
of couple of roadies, you know.
yeah, exactly. So
Oh
it,
my
it had
God.
this very fun, joyful, and Professor Lin is always laughing. And that's definitely something that's a key aspect. If anyone watching is searching for a teacher, find a teacher that laughs a lot. That will be much more beneficial.
Yeah, totally. What was what is the primary aim of the 18 Tai Chi Qigong? And
Mhm.
so I guess that aim would have set forth the means to achieve it, which is the creation of the system, right? So you
Yes.
can talk about that a little bit.
Mhm. So it's actually a request of the Chinese government. And at the time, that request came through the health ministry that approached Professor Lin and asked him to design a system that would be accessible to the larger population. Again, that's late 70s, just before the beginning of the 80s. China had a lot of people already, and they needed help to support the health of the population. And because of the skill that Professor Lin had already developed and his natural, scientifically oriented mind, they were like, well, you're one of the good people that we want. And if we look at the history, there's quite a few people that developed system at the time that were supported and put forward and became fairly popular in that qigong boom era. And so this was kind of the original request that came in for him to design something. And because of his interest of Taiji Chuan and the study that he had did in Shanghai with it, and all of his very strong background in Qigong, he basically coined the term Taiji Qigong.
Mm.
And maybe that's a question for you because I'm not 100% sure I'm right on that. But as far as I can see, Taiji Qigong as kind of a single idea is not something that I've seen before Professor Lin coined the term in that like 1979, 1980 era.
Yeah.
Before they're usually talked separated, there's Tai Chi, Tai Chi Chuan, and then there's Qigong. But today we see Taiji Qigong linked together almost everywhere, partially for marketing because more people know about Tai Chi, not so much about Qigong, and I understand that. Um, but I don't know if you ever noticed it in some text that predated the
Well,
1980s.
I'm going through my brain right now and
Mm-hmm.
all the books on my library. And most of the ones that I'm remembering, most of the ones that have Tai Chi Qigong as the title or in the title were published in the 80s
Okay.
at some point. I would say 80, 86 and after maybe. Um, as I go through my head. Yeah, I don't think I have
Mm-hmm.
any in the 70s. It's all
Mm-hmm.
Tai Chi or Qigong, you know.
Separated. That's
Yeah,
that's my guess,
so
and
yeah,
yeah, I'm very open to being wrong on everything that I
yeah, me
say.
too.
And if I am, then people tell me and show me, it's like, oh, good. So it's not his thing. But so far, it seems to be
Yeah,
the first time these two words were kind of put together.
yeah,
Hence why he kept it as Tai Chi Qigong 18 movement, because it encapsulated the spirit of the system he started to create.
yeah,
And I'm not even sure that when he created set one, he had the intention of creating a whole system. It because also Set One became public in the early 1980s, 1980, and Set Two only became public in 1988. So
mm,
I think it's from the interest of the public and the enjoyment that people had and kind of asking for more that he started to design Set Two and made it public in 1988. And shortly after that, Set Three and Set Four came about in the early 90s. So I think it's from set 2 and on that he decided to create something bigger. Just as a quick parenthesis, set 1, 2, and 3 are all 18 individual movement form. And set 4 is actually the recombination of all of those 54 movements in like 1, 2, and 3, one movement of each put together for 18 different disease pattern. So he created a fully medical Qigong practice for 18 of the most common health issue at the time: high blood pressure, heart issue, tuberculosis, hepatitis, things like that. So we can retranslate that as tuberculosis being like lung issue, hepatitis being any kind of liver issue, heart issue, blood pressure, diabetes, things like that. So even though the first set already had a lot of health benefit and support, which is probably why it became so popular, is regardless of how close to the original people are practicing, they seem to get benefits.
Yeah.
And that was one of the main intent behind it, and one of the things Professor Lin is the most proud of in his work. In the 80s, a lot of people started teaching Qigong, and a lot of weird things started to pop out. And unfortunately, because of those weird things popping out, a lot of people screwed themselves up through Qigong sickness or dragon sickness or Qi deviation, all meaning kind of the same thing. The primary issue being people pushing too much Qi upward and the Qi getting stuck in their head. And unfortunately, in the worst case scenario, meaning that they ended up in a psychiatric hospital because it was just too much and they blown a fuse. And once the fuse is blown, you can't fix it sometimes. So that was one of the main issue that also him, as the director of the Shanghai Qigong Research Institute and doing a lot of medical Qigong work, he's seen a lot of people who did stupid things with Qigong and needed support. And I'm not saying that the people who did that were stupid. They just got the wrong information or the wrong understanding and ended up in a really bad place, unfortunately. So Professor Lin is very happy that regardless of how transformed people end up doing a system, they usually don't create that kind of issue. So that was one of the main idea behind it, is to help people feel better with something simple. And as you're well aware, I'm sure, with your experience, the better you get at something, the easier it is to refine and make it look simple. And the reason it becomes simple is because of all the work you did before. So unfortunately, a lot of people with Taiji Qigong Shibashi, when they see it, don't see the depth. They see the simplicity, and because it's so simple to practice and gain benefits, they kind of stop there. But the real engineering behind it is where, to me, as a Qigong nerd, this is where the fun is and how far it can get you in that practice.
Well, that's like anything with, martial arts, yoga. It's like everybody's practicing the shell or the skin and the hair, and they don't go to the bone marrow, right? They don't go deep. So you can learn the choreography quite easily. Even if you're not good at it, you can still learn the sequence, but doesn't mean anything's happening other than aerobic activity or some stretching, Let's move down to basics for our viewers. So we're talking about Qigong and Qi and energy and movement, what you can feel and not feel, and transmitting with the sword fingers. It all sounds very romantic and sci-fi. So the word Qi is often translated as energy or vital essence. But as a medical Qigong practitioner, what is Qi to you? And we know that there's many contexts and uses for that word. It's not a single word like air, but within the context of medical Qigong or the Shibashi system, what is Qi?
That's a very good question. And I like your framing, because that framing is essential. It's within the context of medical Qigong, which borrow a lot of the reflection from Chinese medicine, and including within the system will be very influenced from Professor Lin reflection on it. And for Professor Lin, Qi is an information transmitter. That's something that he considered. Qi is basically a way to move information within the body, and that information basically makes the link between the Jing and the Shen. If we look
Okay.
at the traditional presentation, you have the Jing, which is the structural, the building block of the body. You have the Shen, which encompass all of the mental framework from all of the
Consciousness.
unconscious, subconscious, day-to-day consciousness with the emotional, and then the meditative higher level of consciousness you can develop. So it's kind of it's a frame, and there's different layers into it. And so the chi in between the two is one that helps the consciousness relay information to the physical layer of the body, and the body relay information up. And in Chinese medicine, or even outside of it, the development is the Jing transform into Qi, the Qi transform into Shen. And then when you go more into meditative, the Shen leads you up to Wuji and then the Tao. But in the medicine, the Shen also nourish the acquired Jing, which interestingly match a lot the modern understanding of epigenetic, that
Right.
layer where the mind helps the expression of the Jing, of the genetic
Turning
that's
on and
into
off
you.
the potential. So that it's
Exactly.
interesting because they call the Sanbao, right? The
Mm-hmm.
three treasures are Jing, Qi, and Shen, and I never considered why Qi was in the middle. So
Mm-hmm.
it's very interesting how you just framed it. It's like the messenger, the
Mm-hmm.
transmitter, right?
Yes.
And it's the thumb drive from your laptop to where you're going to go and use it next. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but okay,
Yes.
so you just dropped some more terms that may not be recognizable to the audience. So prenatal chi, postnatal chi, acquired essence. So if we want to talk about that real quick, just
Yes.
to get some definitions down.
Yeah, so quickly, we'll start with the Jing since that's the foundation. Uh, Jing in Chinese medicine is usually translated as essence in the sense of what is the essential building block. So there's an essence, because we're biological, there's a fluidity to essence as a terminology, which is also present in there. Um, my general view is it's through not only the whole structure of the body, everything that is material fall under that category. And at its core, it's the genetic information that we receive from our parents, which is considered the prenatal Jing. So both parents come together. We know now the sperm and ovula come together. It creates that first cell with that new exclusive genetic code that is now you, that will go from a single cell and start to grow. And that same original code is in everything inside your body, everything of your cell, because then come the postnatal, which brings a whole other layer of understanding. So prenatal is what you get from your parents through the genetic and how that genetic code express itself. Through births, we now know that you actually get seeded from a whole slew of microbiomes, which are genetically not you, but are essential to your life, which is postnatal. Through the birth, you receive this symbiotic life, which have a strong influence on how your genetic will be expressing itself as well. And that is strongly influenced through the food and the drink. So we keep the natural traditional framework where the food, the drink, and primarily your thought process, lifestyle, and habits form a layer that support the lifespan that you receive from your genetic through the expression of epigenetic. And the better and healthier you live your life, the better that genetic information you get at first will allow you to live a full and healthy life. The more you party, you drain yourself, you don't sleep enough, you stress too much, you eat McDonald's every day, the more you do kind of lesser good thing, the harder it is for your body to maintain its health, and therefore the earlier you're likely to die, even if you live a bit longer.
Right.
Um, so that's kind of that layer of how can you maintain that layer of health and benefits that's ingrained in your genetic throughout your life.
Hmm.
From this development, as we grow in utero and then after in life, our level of energy, both in the sense of the energy that we spend in the day and the sense of how the chi can develop, how your body can grow, how you adjust to the environment. The sixth function of qi in Chinese medicine of um, transforming the food, transporting the nutrients through your body and the fluids, warming up your body, defending you from external interaction with cold and heat and pathogens. One, two, three, four. I have two more. Holding things in place. So qi in Chinese medicine is a notion of maintaining the elasticity of the tissue, which ultimately, if you start to lose this quality, is organ prolapses, easy to make bruises, like a small impact makes the blood leak out of your system, and all the kind of leak where the qi should have an impact, an effect of maintaining things in place. And so we have these five main quality or responsibility of the qi within our body. And as we grow and develop, our mind continue to develop as human. And usually as we reach our 20s or so, the mind kind of settle in a more stable adult state. And so the stronger our body, the Jing, the stronger the Qi become, and the stronger then our ability to also regulate and manage our hormonal, which is highly influenced through our emotional state, our ability to interact with others, and through cultivation, the ability to go beyond just the connection within our own body can grow, and those ability to perceive the environment on a more subtle perspective starts to develop. So there's a bit of a difference between natural development, the explanation through Chinese medicine, and then cultivation, and what we aim to go more into an athletic development of these skills because we're training them and not just letting life take its course.
Mm-hmm.
The same way that you have people that are naturally athletic, but if they don't train any kind of sports, their athleticism is kind of lost. It's just their daily life. But if they train it, they have the potential to go. Some people have amazing level of intelligence, and so they naturally go towards developing that level of intelligence in a different way and go more into scientific study and things like that, versus not allowing that and taking a less intellectual type of job, for example.
Yeah.
So we have all of these structure that can develop. So we've talked a little bit about the different layers of Shen and then the Qi that's in between. I think I've covered everything. That
Yeah,
sounds
yeah,
good to you? Yeah.
yeah. So qi, in addition to being a kind of physiological process in the body and a what they call it, transform and transport
Mm-hmm.
effect in the body. Qi is also a felt energetic process in the body,
Mm-hmm. Yes.
and you can feel qi, right? So you can
Mm-hmm.
feel it doing the exercises. At what point can you share when qi went from a concept and an idea in your head to a felt experience and what that was like?
Mm-hmm. Um, it's one of the first exercise I learned, and I probably transformed it a little bit throughout my own development, but feeling that sensation between your palm. And usually I get people to kind of massage the center of the palm a little bit to get the movement and open up the Laogong point, which is an acupuncture point at the center. And then when you start to feel, there's this, all of a sudden the air between your hands feels a bit more denser.
Yeah.
The sensation almost like if you played with magnets and they're on the same side facing each other and you feel that repulsion, you kind of get that kind of feeling, or at least to me, that was the first sensation of what qi could be that I got when I started studying that. Um,
That was
and
also my
some,
first. So we had the same initial experience. Yeah. That means it's true.
it is, it is. Well,
Yeah.
I've seen enough people discovering that sensation for the first time that
Yeah.
there's definitely a core to it. Some people will feel it more as a level of warmth. So their hand will become really warm and they feel that warmth more than usual. Some people will get more of a kind of pins and needle sensation. And that if we had an extra layer of understanding, it's the capillaries opening up. So it's a sign that blood circulation was a little tighter than it could have been. And as the qi arrives, then the blood opens and arrive as well. And it gives you this tingly sensation, a little bit like when you're sleeping wrong and the blood is cut, and when it comes back, it gives you that kind of pins and needle feeling. So that's also another one sensation that some people may feel at first. And to help feel chi, my suggestion to people is to create contrast. So that feeling of chi, if they don't get it, is to first kind of separate their hands, notice how they feel when they're not facing each other, and then bring them back and see, oh, there's like the same with those magnets, there's a moment where something click. Like, oh yeah, that sensation feels different. Even if conceptually people don't really know how to explain it, they're able to feel that there's a difference. That's usually the first, the door is opening, and then you can start to play, and you need to train to develop the sensation better.
Hmm.
And I would say one of the simplest modern way to understand chi's place in the body, it's like the Wi-Fi of our nervous system.
Oh,
That
good.
relates very well to Professor Lin's notion of chi being an information carrier. It has this ability to reach out outside of the limitation of the physical nerve and go through the different tissue layer and communicate. And my personal theory, which is starting to pick up more and more interest, particularly in China and in different places through Chinese medicine research, is the layer that we now know in biomedicine as gasotransmitters, particularly nitric oxide, which is a form of neurotransmitter that's a gaseous molecule. And because of its structure, it's a gaseous molecule that circulates in the body that doesn't need like oxygen to be absorbed by the red blood cell and be carried around. And it has this ability to permeate and move through the different layers, and to strengthen the link with the nervous system. Viagra is the first medication that they created after discovering nitric oxide because of its effect on vasodilation through the penile nerve, sorry for my pronunciation, and then producing that vasodilation and the engorgement. So the nerve produces nitric oxide, which then circulate and create other effect on blood circulation. And since the 1998 Nobel Prize, when they first discovered gasotransmitter and nitric oxide in particular, there's now a ton of research that if we look at the result and the effect of nitric oxide in various situations in the body, and we look at the explanation of what chi does in all the same situation, we have almost an exact match of definition. And so we can see that it's just a question of translation, translating
Right.
ancient text understanding of what chi meant into modern day through the understanding of that definition.
That's interesting.
Uh,
Yeah.
yeah. And so like we could go in a whole other discussion with
Right, right.
all of that, but that would take a long time to play with it.
Oh,
Um,
man. So you spoke a moment ago about the Shen or the consciousness and the
mhm,
mind, and we talked about the Jing or the essence, the
mhm,
pre and postnatal essence, and Qi being a carrier for this and transmitter for that.
mhm,
And Taoist philosophy describes cultivation as a returning the body and the mind to harmony with the Tao, right? Or
mhm.
the greatness. And how does the Qigong support that in a practitioner?
That's a very good question. And I'll specifically frame my answer through the Taiji Qigong Shibashi system because different system approach things a little bit differently. And in that sense, although Taiji Qigong Shibashi doesn't claim to be a Taoist system, there's a lot of
Yeah.
influence through it. Professor Lin background, even though he doesn't consider himself a Buddhist practitioner, the Shaolin system had the Chan Buddhism influence behind it. So a lot of the training has those relationships, just as it is in Chinese society in general. And so the idea of returning to tranquility, entering a state of meditative observation where once we learn the form and we practiced it enough that we don't need to think about it, there's a certain level of boredom that kind of show up. And most people tend to not like boredom, and so they want to learn something new to not feel the boredom. But that boredom is really important. If you understand it, it means you don't need to think about what you do anymore. And that's where you can start to really look more inward and see what's actually happening in your body. And once you've played enough with the sensation around your hands and the chi starts to become stronger, then you can notice some of those sensations moving through you as you're doing your move. So, as a beginning practice, Taiji Qigong Shibashi use images to kind of serve as a placeholder for the mind so that you don't get distracted by many things. You know, there's the famous third movement of set one, waving the rainbow, where you're moving a rainbow between your hands, or then you have separating the clouds, which you're swimming in a beautiful white cloud and you're kind of pushing it away. Or my image to it is when I was a kid, I loved when there were really thick fog. I'm from Montreal, so in winter,
Oh,
sometimes when it's warmer, you get that big fog and sign of I'm moving through. I can't see around. I want to
swimming through the
swim into that.
fog. Yeah.
Exactly. So this kind of idea, and it also brings you the idea of what would feel the cloud, what's the density of the cloud. And so you start to develop the feeling of that thickness, that magnetic sensation around you, so on and so forth, until you become actually more fascinated by observing these sensation inside of you, so you don't need the image anymore. You
Yeah.
enter that state of quietness where you find it more interesting to observe how things are changing in your body as you play and you do your form, and you feel each repetition starting to feel different. You want to reach that point that even if you do the same movement 5, 6 times, which is the average in the form, or even if you do it 10, 15, 20 times, each time feels different. And ideally, each microsecond as you're moving through starts to feel different because your body is changing. You are changing as you're doing that.
Mm.
And so at first, if you're not bored because your mind is still busy trying to think, oh, I have my arm needs to be there, I need to lift, I need to drop my shoulder, I still need to breathe, and then oh yeah, then my arm can come down, and oh, I have to bend my legs, and all of that chatter prevents you from fully being in there. But we need that phase to, okay, now I understand enough of the movement, then I can become quiet and ah, silence feels good. I
Moving
almost don't want to talk
meditation.
anymore.
Right.
Exactly.
It's like
Yeah.
getting into a samadhi state while still moving, which
Hmm.
is probably harder than just sitting, but it gives you an
Yes.
awareness of this turning your eyes around into yourself, and feeling what's going on and putting all that awareness inside the body.
Hmm.
Um, that's really good.
Yes.
That's really
Yeah.
good. Does
And
does oh, go ahead.
I was just gonna add a little bit. I think that's one of the reason why Qigong is such a important part of the overall training.
Mm,
If we look at brain waves, what we find in EEG, a different brainwave of the mind, alpha state is kind of the main state we want to be in when we move, when we do the practice. And usually, as soon as we start to move, there's so much more noise coming through because of the physical movement, which the electromyogram and the activity in the brain of movement is 10 times louder than the general EEG. That's why the current technology can only measure them when you're mostly still and not
mm,
when you're moving. So when you do a lot of deep meditation without moving, you can usually go a lot deeper. But for many people, as soon as they get out of that state and they start to move, the screaming monkey in our minds start to be very agitated again.
yeah.
Whereas practicing Qigong, even though it's a lot difficult to go as deep as when you're fully seated and non-moving, the deeper you can get in those state as you're moving around, the easier it become to carry that meditative state throughout your day. And that's, I think, one of the most beneficial reason for anyone to practice qigong, especially if they already have seated practice and they don't really see why moving meditation would bring them anything better because they don't feel they're able to go as deep. But that transition between meditation and daily life, I think the qigong helps to really make it from the seated cushion to the moving into your daily life and kind of create a transition that goes very well.
Yeah. For me, one of the biggest negatives of just seated meditation is the lack of the body in the exercise in the practice, right?
Hmm.
Everything can't just be in the mind.
Yeah.
We have a body, we need to prepare the body, we need to move the body, we need to energize the body and keep it healthy. And, if you're not off doing sports and weightlifting and track and different things, Qigong is the best thing I think for adults, the movements. They're slow, they're purposeful, there's isotonic movement, there's isometric holding. Plus, when you
Hmm.
get the yi or the intention to turn the mind into the body, that's where meditation comes in especially when you stop thinking about the sequence and the movement and you're fully aware of the energy moving inside your body. I mean, it's a whole different thing. You might not get to nirvana as quickly or maybe at all, but there's also seated qigong and lying qigong practices, but we're just talking about the movement ones. But it creates a whole different level of experience and development in the body. So, um,
Yes.
they're both great, but
Hmm.
just wanted to add some things there. And did you find for you that qigong, uh, your work in it has helped your perception and your awareness become more clear and your
Hmm.
thinking process?
Yes. Yes. So one of my favorite things to do whenever I can go to a botanical garden is to play around and feel the chi of all the different plants.
Yeah.
And a few years back, when I was in acupuncture school, I actually took some of my classmates to a botanical garden on a day off, and we're like, "Look, you want to know what chi is, and especially you want to understand why herbal medicine work the way it does. This is how you're going to understand it." And usually plants in a botanical garden are so strong and there's so much variety that
Yeah.
even people who never did qigong start to pick things up. It's like, oh wow, that feels so different. And spiky plants really feel spiky before you touch them. So there's no reason to go and
Yeah.
stab yourself on them. You can know that in advance. And feeling, a descending plant that's suspended and feeling how the energy actually grounds you versus a
Mm.
plant that's rising and you just feel that expansiveness, or some plant that are really sucking the chi into you or even pulling the chi out of you because they're pulling in, they're removing it. And so understanding those four movements of chi through herbology, once you have a good idea of that, you can grab some herbs and bring their essence into you and feel that sensation. And there's some story where during that Qigong boom period in China, some hospital had their herbal garden where people would do Qigong with the plant that they needed rather than consuming them.
Mm.
So they would go and just kind of connect and relax and let the benefits of the plants through that Qi exchange from the environment. And we could even argue there's, the chemical effect of the essence that the plant is emanating and all of that as well that are likely a part of it. So feeling how the plant is and that connectivity and feeling how it affects your body can give you those benefits. Particularly trees, the bigger they get, the strong roots, you can just stand there and feel that connection. I had a student once I met in a park, and we were close to a lake, and there was this giant willow tree. And I did not know that when I met my student and we did the course. But at the end of the course, she was telling me how she felt really bad on that day and was expecting to go to the hospital. When I met her, she just told me she was feeling bad. And the symptoms that she had was really related to some issue of the liver that needed to be drained. So we were next to the willow tree and it's like, oh yeah, the willow will help you. Let's do some qigong with it. And it actually drained and her face completely changed and she was feeling a lot better. If I knew she was thinking about going to the ER, I would have told her, no, we're not doing the class, just go to the ER, because I didn't know the extent of how she was
Right.
feeling. But the exercise was strong enough that she felt completely different after and didn't need to anymore.
Mm.
So just an example of how some plant can have a very strong effect. And we were basically just grasping the essence of what the plant was releasing on top, draining through the body, draining it down towards the root, and getting that exchange. And we have that natural exchange with plants anyway. We inhale oxygen, we exhale CO2. During the day, most of the plant absorb that CO2, use it for photosynthesis and then release the oxygen back to us. So we have this symbiotic relationship with them. So exchanging energy goes in the same way. So that was very interesting as a anecdotal experience for somebody else than just myself, who actually felt a lot better from that.
Oh, that's
Yeah.
amazing. Now
Mm.
I'm going to go all around the house and play with the plants. But that makes perfect sense. If plants are living, and this is why it wouldn't work with medication because the medicine is dead, essentially, right? There's no life
Mhm.
force in it. You know, it's
Yeah.
just things to affect cellular structure and different
Mhm.
things and affect the blood in the body. But plants are living, and
Mhm.
you know, so they're emanating energy. And like you say,
Mhm.
you know, they're breathing in carbon dioxide, breathing in and expelling
Mhm.
the oxygen, and there's photosynthesis, all kinds of things happening that
Mhm.
and that exchange is natural, a symbiotic relationship. So
Mhm.
I hadn't thought about I feel things. We have quite a few arboretums and nurseries around here for trees and
Mhm.
plants, and it always feels good to go. But I never thought,
Mhm.
which is weird, 40 years of Qigong, you know, I never thought like, hey, maybe it's the Qi. I just thought this is a cool place to be. So
It
thank
is. They're
you.
usually in their ideal environment as well.
They
They're really
are,
well taken care of. So their health is nice and strong. And you're in
right.
this little bit of a bubble as
The
well. So
bubble.
there's a buildup also in that environment.
Right.
Um, and the opportunity to see many different varieties of plants next to each other creates a really fun playground to discover that.
It
Yeah.
does indeed. Now, you know, Qigong practice, especially the moving Qigong practice, you know, it's really there's three basic things that have to come together and be aligned. And, you know, that's breath. And for the standing or sitting postures, that's posture. But for, I mean, exercise is posture. But for Shibasha, it's movement. So breath, movement, and then intention, right? And those three need to really be in harmony for somebody practicing these to get the greatest benefit. So can you talk about that for a little bit? Because I think that's going to help clear up for a lot of people who are like, I'm moving my hands, I don't feel anything. What am I having for lunch? And my breath isn't regulated to the movement. I mean, those, it's just align three things and you can get an experience.
Yes. And it's interesting because, again, within that whole three-part system, modern science is discovering and understanding it better and better and better,
Yeah.
particularly in the sense of breath. Uh, Traditionally, there's a lot of system that recommend a 5 to 6 breath per minute cycle. And there's more and more research that demonstrate how that specific rhythm of breath, one is the one that helps the brain harmonize its function better.
Mm.
So the full network of the brain kind of harmonize and start to resonate better together. Um, yes, the alpha brainwave is also one that seems to be entrained better through that 6 breath per minute rhythm, and there's multiple elements that combine together through that rhythm. So the use of the breath and the way we do it also in Taiji Qigong Shibashi will have a support to help calm the mind. So one of the very common question for breathing is it inhale, exhale through the nose, inhale, exhale through the mouth. What's the difference? And the general rule of thumb, inhale, exhale through the nose would have more of an energizing effect. When you do something a little more physical, you want more of a harmonious release. As soon as you start to do some type of more active physical activity, exhaling through your mouth becomes something more present. And so in Taiji Qigong Shibashi, Professor Lin suggests a very soft exhale through your mouth. Very, you know, you don't want that. You don't want your
Mhm.
breath to be strong enough to push. You want it to be where the tissue is barely moving. So
Yeah.
it's the same intensity as if you're exhaling through your nose. You just perk your lips open and allow that breath to come out softly. Versus a stronger exhale will have usually more of a deeper releasing, relaxing effect. If you feel a little stressed, that's going to release that tension. So sometimes it's good to have stronger exhale at first until your mind is a bit calmer, and then you go into a more harmonizing breathing pattern. Um, and I have a bit of a mixed agreement with that general structure of body, breath, and mind, mostly because I think breath is not fully in the middle. There's some level. So as I said, the breath can have a positive impact on quieting the mind, but the part of the breath that's often missing is actually the structural need for the breath to be ideal that will therefore influence the whole structure of the body, which plays into the body positioning and or the movement as well. Specifically in the way I teach, I use the 3 layers of the breath, the abdominal, thoracic, and upper thoracic. And the abdominal in particular sets up all of your foundation. It places your pelvis, it engages your abdomen, it opens up your back. And through the proper alignment of the pelvis will even allow the cranial sacral rhythm to start to show, because the engagement of the perineum in response to the pressure of the diaphragm move your sacrum, and therefore that creates a ripple through your spine, which will increase the pressure inside, pushing on your spine out, which open Migman. And after that, you have the rest of the thoracic area, the placement of the shoulder blade, the expansion of the ribs, and how the movement of your shoulder blade will influence how your arms are moving. So all of that through the breath has a very significant connection also with the physical movement, as much as it has an effect on the quietness of the mind. The better, smoother, and more regular your breath is, the quieter your mind can be. As soon as we start to think too much, our breath becomes shallower. As the more we're stressed, the more likely we have very upper chest, shallow breath, and the body is barely reacting because everything is so tense because of the mind. So we want that harmony also between the mind and the body to harmonize. And through the breath in the middle, it's one way that we can get things started. As we're standing, between standing posture, Zanzuan type of training versus movement, to me, they're 2 sides of the same coin. Holding posture technically builds the chi, movement circulates it and removes stagnation. So for full development, you need both in your training. But movement, if we break it down, is a sequence of posture that you're chaining together, which gives you the final movement. And posture within that movement are just frame of a whole movement. And so using both, taking a movement, finding the areas where you can stop, holding those posture a little bit to see how that affects your body, and especially as the chi builds up. And then when you do your form, can you feel the same intensity instantly as you're moving? Because both of them have challenges. Holding posture will build the feeling, but takes time. So can you feel that same sensation almost instantly as you're moving? But if you're holding posture a lot and you're haven't really worked on your stagnation, that becomes very uncomfortable very quickly. So doing movement will release those stagnation and make you feel a lot floatier. And through that combination of breath, posture, and movement, you can learn to fully realign your body and use the minimum amount of effort as you're doing your movement, which will then, of course, benefit your mind. Your mind will become quieter, will be able to observe, and you'll notice also, either through posture or movement, when your mind becomes distracted is when your structures start to suffer, regardless if it's static or moving. When your mind starts to think about something, oh, you're lifting your shoulder more. So notice, what were you thinking about? Not necessarily the pure subject, but the thought pattern you were in that brought you that tension. So it becomes a whole self-evaluation tool each time you're doing it, which links to what I was saying earlier of feeling that every movement is different. The more we get into a relaxed state, the more we can feel the body refine itself. And as soon as we get distracted, it's like, oh, my tension is back. Okay, what was I thinking about? Oh, I was getting angry at someone again. I go back to anger all the time. That's my go-to emotion. Oh, okay, I need to ease off on that. There's no reason to revisit an argument I had with someone a week ago. It's gone. It's over. And if it's not over, it should be over. So forget about it. Just let things go and then feel that relaxation. And we start to build those links between the physical and the mind. And so then we can also just notice maybe we didn't notice the thought pattern, but we noticed the tension, then the thought pattern disappear. So, oh, let me relax the physical, and so the mind become quieter again. So we get to play in whichever side is easier for us. So we have the three of them working together. And to me, it's when those three start to work together that the feeling of chi really start to appear in the middle. And
Yeah.
that strengthen those links.
In terms of medical Qigong, if somebody's just learning for medical Qigong, they don't need Shibashi, right? Because they'll have a system of just developing Qi and emitting Qi and feeling and diagnosing Qi. Or
Mhm,
is part of it that through the Shibashi, you're opening the meridian channels in the body.
mhm,
And in order to emit chi, those your own channels need to be open, right? If there's blockages or stagnations, as we call them,
mhm,
excess stagnations, deficiencies, that also affects your ability to
mhm.
be a chi healer, correct?
Yes. So to the general question, do somebody need Taiji Qigong Shibashi to become a medical Qigong practitioner? No, of course not. There's tons of different systems that exist out there. The Taiji Qigong Shibashi is a part of it. It's not the full thing. So if I look at more of Professor Lin, the whole complete system, which includes the Zanzuan practice, then yes, both of them are kind of two sides of the training. As you said, the movement will help to remove some level of stagnation, and it will help develop awareness of your body that will take maybe a bit longer to discover only through standing practice alone. And especially if you have a lot of tension, standing practice will reveal certain things, but can be a bit annoying to do at time when the stagnation becomes like a
It's
really burning
painful.
hot cold. It
Yeah.
can be painful. Yeah. So the movement practice will help to ease that and gives you a much more supporting or much more pleasurable type of experience of training over time. But Taiji Qigong Shibashi is an amazing tool to have to teach patients to start to fix themselves. So medical Qigong kind of have two parallel branch. There's the therapist development for Qi emission and what you can do with it. And then there's the use of various Qigong exercise for specific health benefits. So that requires still, I would say it's a little bit the physiotherapy of ancient China. One
Right.
of the oldest books, I don't know if you're familiar with Dali Yang, translation of a book from the Sioux era, like around the 600 years ago, era period,
Hmm.
that the emperor created a full, well, not the emperor himself, but the doctors of the emperor created a full manual of Taoian exercise for specific health condition based on Chinese medicine
Yeah.
principle. So it created that whole system, and that's one of the oldest one. And they were using it literally as a form of what we would call today physiotherapy, not just for physical issue, but for internal issue, wind disorder, even paralysis, or all of it. So it's a very interesting book, and that's one of the oldest textbook for medical practitioner of exercise being used for specific issue.
Yeah.
So Taiji Qigong Shibashi serves that same purpose with a more modern view versus the Daoyin style exercise of the era. So the two sides are very interesting. And as a medical Qigong therapist, I still use daily movement practice to feel how things are moving. And usually, when I teach someone, the engagement of my own chi through the movement will serve as a support for them as they're practicing with me so that their body, I compare that, if you will, to an orchestra where you have one, the usually the oboe. I'm not sure if that's the name in English, the bass
Oboe. Hmm.
oboe that gives the note, and then everybody else is tuning themselves to. And then
Mm.
similarly, you also have, if you take like two guitars side by side and you
Being trained.
stroke like a string on one, then the other one will harmonically vibrate at the same note. So as the strength of the teacher or therapist become strong enough, there's a mirroring effect or harmonious effect that start to happen in the patient or student. And when I'm treating people, often if I specifically working on a channel, as I'm moving the chi through, I'll engage the movement in my own channel consciously and intensely so that there's both the quality of the chi I'm emitting and the resonance effect that's also happening. So I'm kind of using the maximum tool in my toolkit at the same time to support the patient. Um, so it all kind of blends together at some point. So I
Mm.
think using both is great, and it depends on some people will prefer standing, some people will prefer movement, and through the development, it kind of blends at some point anyway.
Yeah. After, all your decades of training, how has Qigong changed your own relationship to your own body?
Um, I have no idea who I would be if I didn't do that. Um,
Of course.
so yeah, I mean, it's so integrated in my life. Let's see, at some point, um, probably over 10 years ago, I had a bit of a depression phase. And I was still teaching, so I was still doing a little bit, but I almost had completely left my own practice for about a 6 month period. And when I stopped teaching, there was a few months where I didn't do anything for a while. And I ended up in a place where I could not even feel my own chi between my hands. And so I was like, okay, did I? Because when I first started learning Qigong, feeling Qi between my palms came fairly easy. I mean, I was 17 also, so that was a good thing. And so feeling it, I was like, wow, that's cool. And it all, from that point, it kind of always been there in some level and increased through the Qigong practice. But when I had that depression and stop, there was nothing. Up to a point where I was like, did I invented the sensation all of my life? What was going on with that? And it took me a good month of going back into just practicing set one as my only Qigong practice daily, rediscovering my own enthusiasm for the practice, for starting to feel a little bit of something after. But the next day, if I was trying to feel it, there was nothing. And then I would do the practice again, kind of go back into it as like, oh, the chi is coming back. And over the following few months, since new sensation reappeared and was like, oh, I remember feeling that before. Like, oh yeah, I haven't felt that in a while. And then later it's like, oh, there's that sensation again. And so I kind of rediscovered all of it. So to answer your question, like, yeah, I don't want to go back to not feeling any of that ever again.
Yeah.
It's the connection that it gives inside your body, those I mean, it's hard to put words into it because there's so much. The ability to go and feel so connected to yourself, to life, and outward as well. One element is the more you can feel inside or the more you can feel outside, it kind of blends together. The
Yeah.
deeper you go in one direction, the deeper you can go in the other. And feeling these relationships, feeling the constant flow of the chi from heaven coming down. And just a quick parenthesis, heaven in the Chinese concept is not the heaven of Christian or religion in general. It's more the infinite universe that's above our head. The notion of the Tao is we have these electromagnetic waves that constantly come to us from the sun, the polarization that the moon gives it. So the night feels a little bit different, especially on a full moon. And then everything else that we haven't discovered yet that comes from the depth of the universe that constantly passes through. But if we start to attune ourselves to those vibrations, then we can start to feel things differently. And we can sometimes track a certain sensation very far. Um, are we really that far? Is it mostly imagination? We don't have tools to measure that just yet. My guess is that we have the possibility to kind of send a beacon somewhere and feel very far away. Um, but that's yet to be fully proven. But that's kind of that sensation and the relationship as well with the Earth, how the Earth reflects all of those electromagnetic waves, that bubble that we live in, the atmosphere that's around that have different level of vibration as we go through the Schumann resonance and all of that. The difference in the thickness of the air. When I first moved to Mexico, I was in Puebla, which is 2,300 meter of altitude. So it's what, 5,000 feet or so. I was surprised at some point. I felt that my breath in my qigong was a bit limited, and I didn't understand why until I traveled back to Montreal and I had no issue breathing, doing the same movement. I didn't feel out of breath. It's like, oh yeah, thickness of the air. That's why it was a bit more difficult over there. So that kind of changed and
Yeah.
held the understanding as well. So all of these layers are part of me. Now, I mean, the feeling of chi is there all the time. I just place my hand and play with it. I just bring my mind somewhere in my body and I feel it. So it took a while to develop, and it's the training that is needed to do that. But once it becomes so interesting, it's just part of life. And I would even say it's part of everybody's life. We're just not trained to perceive it so much. Some people naturally can feel it. Um, the same way some people have a strong sense of smell. They can perceive minute detail much more precisely than other, or taste. And sometimes people start to become chef and they study kitchen, and as they go around, the refinement of their taste develop. So there's some people that are more naturally inclined to it, some people that are less, but there's a range of development that everybody can get through that.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So,
When you feel you were talking about connecting with the same meridian that you may be working on, so
mhm,
liver meridian and someone has liver trouble, something like that. Although liver meridian, it's down by the big toe, it
mhm,
starts down in the feet. But
mhm.
when you're um, emitting chi with a patient and you're connecting the meridian, do you experience that same magnetic feeling like you get in your hands
Mhm.
in the channel moving in your body?
Similarly, yes. So the movement in the channel is a little bit, it's a lot narrower, but it's very precise. One of the first time I had a sensation in a very particular channel, I had some cold in my stomach, and I lay down in bed for like 2 to 3 hours, breathing, kind of falling asleep, waking up. I was a little sick that day, and feeling the cold starting to warm up. And all of a sudden, the large intestine point that relates to the inside of the body started to become really cold. And then the
Mm,
cold started to travel towards the tip of my finger, clearly
that's cool.
drawing the path of the channel. And then the elbow started to warm up, and then the tail end of the cold reached, and then it was over. So that was like the first time I was like, oh, yeah, that's really my large intestine channel. There's no doubt that, because I wasn't expecting the large intestine channel to exit, for the cold to exit that way, and even less in the direction against the general flow of the channel. So
Right.
for those who don't know, the large intestine channels start from the finger, and the general flow move up to the side of the nose. So I wasn't expecting that. I had the theoretical knowledge, but the physical sensation was the opposite of what I would have thought. So it was
Yeah.
a big surprise to feel that. And now I can just, either focus on one point, feel it, warm up, open up. There's that buzzing sensation, but that's much tighter than when you feel more the chi between your hands. And of course, you can make it a lot tighter. You can make it move, and there's spiraling sensation and so on. The first time you get the big chi balls spiraling in your palms, like, oh well, I guess Dragon Ball wasn't that off
Yeah.
after
And
all.
Aquaman with the water
Sure.
balls.
Exactly, all of those sensations. They're
Yeah.
representing something that's kind of lying in the background, but that some people were able to really feel and stayed in the general consciousness of the population. So when I'm working on someone, if I'm also connecting to the feeling of the movement in their own channel, one of the specialty of that massage system that I originally learned was to move the chi through the channel from a single point.
Hmm.
So grabbing a point, pulling the chi through, and observing, feeling how that chi is moving, and then feeling the chi, the unsuitable chi that was locked around from external invasion coming through and releasing it. You can clearly feel when there's cold embedded, or the stickiness of dampness, or the heat that comes up to the surface, and feel also how the tissue around will be either very tight and hard and start to release. And maybe when you press at first, it it kind of stay floppy. There's no reaction, and then gradually the tissue filled up. So all of those transformation within the body of the patient are palpable, both from physical contact and from a distance. And from a distance being either not touching them on the table in the same room or a few thousand miles away when you develop the distance healing skills.
Yeah.
Um,
I can see why medical associations and governing boards are reluctant to give licenses to practitioners because it's most of this is based on your subjective feelings, and those
Yes.
feelings take a decade. I mean, really, to get to really be able to do what we're talking about here today, And then there's no like a written exam. They don't have a like one of those CPR dolls, that when you learn CPR here, that you can put your hand on and they can track the chi move from the liver and go to this, large intestines, or rather the gallbladder, for the lung to the large intestine. And there's nothing that can register whether we have the skill or don't have the skill, or whether some cold left and it's replaced by heat, etc. So you can see why there's a pushback in the Western medical thing, but it's undeniable when you're feeling things that you're not thinking to feel, like you were just saying, or when there's that kinetic feeling of the magnets. It's anybody could feel it if they just spend a few minutes and learn the process, and then people feel better, and you can't say it's all psychosomatic either. I mean, thousands of years in China, practitioners, case studies, millions of case studies. I mean, it's crazy. So it's just, I guess it's just a comment for our listeners that
Yeah,
this,
completely.
this isn't
And
just psychic healing. This is actually a science, a method, a process, a cultivation, involved with it. Yeah.
yeah, and the ability to train people to gain the same type of results.
Right.
This is really one of the empirical layer of that that's very interesting. Um, to what you say, I would just add the word yet.
Yet.
We
Yeah.
don't have the tools yet. Um, and I'm very much enthusiastic to see how future science will be able to measure those in some way, because it would also help us to eliminate the stuff that is not necessary and
Right.
keep the things that we know work, with keeping the parentheses that there's still going to be stuff that we don't yet understand that we'll discover later on. So
Yeah.
there's always an evolution, and that's the base of science. We grab the data that we have, we understand it a certain way, and we keep researching so we can find a better way of understanding it, which opens new door. Um,
Yeah.
one of the way that's interesting to start to play with, thanks to simple, for example, EEG device measuring brainwave for meditative, like there's the Muse brand that's fairly popular and relatively cheap, relatively. That's would be interesting to get, some people who practice their own meditation, who get some data of relaxing on their own, and then getting them to receive a healing and see how that affect their brainwave. Because some of the research that were done early on was that synchrony that happened between therapist and patient receiving it. They were done more on heart rate, heart rhythm, and one of Professor Lin's early student in Japan did a study like that, where when he was starting to do the chi emission, the brain frequency or vibration between him and the patient kind of started to harmonize. I don't
Mhm.
think it was as precise as modern EEG, because we're talking about something in the mid 80s probably, but we can now have better tools that would be interesting to develop with that. I did some tests myself with one of my students who received distant healing, who has some of that. One of the other tool we use was also a heart rate variability monitor, and the clear distinction in the extensiveness of the heart rate variability happening when we entered into that state versus when there was even just a little bit of conversation, it kind of shrunk and then the distance came in. So we're starting to have some tools, and particularly now also thanks to AI and their ability to pick up a lot of information and process it quickly,
Yeah.
it's becoming more accessible to people without the need of having like a $10,000-$20,000 research lab to do that. So I think we're going to be able to grow this kind of research, even if it's more on like a personal experience level, not necessarily fully scientific, but that will open the door to search more. And even if all of that prove that none of it works as far as how we think it is, if just the placebo effects is in place and it's enough for someone to start to heal themselves, then it's a win.
Yeah. Well, placebo was super strong. It used to be a bad word,
Yeah,
but
it
now,
shouldn't be.
yeah, I mean, I've read probably, I don't know, 12 or 13 books on the placebo effect. In the 90s, I was doing a lot of research on it for myself and for writing articles. And my father was a physician, and we talk about it all the time. And the placebo effect is basically your mind's ability to heal itself. And if you think, and, when I was in college, my major was sociology, but my minor was medical anthropology. The college didn't have an anthropology major. I would have done that. But part of that study in medical anthropology was how patients talk differently to different healers. So when you're talking to the shaman of your tribe, you're telling him things that you think the shaman needs to hear. When you go to the say a psychologist's office, you're telling the psychologist things you think are relevant for them to hear within the realm of what you think their therapy does. And when you see your medical doctor, you're not talking about the shaman stuff and your dreams, and you're not talking about the therapy stuff and your mind thoughts. You're talking about how your stomach hurts and it pulls in your chest and you have dry heave, so you're not getting a full story.
Chinese medicine outside of herbology, because herbology you're taking something, but
Right,
acupuncture, medical qigong, all of that are in a sense a way to trigger a placebo effect in the body, to trigger the normal healing of your body so that
right,
things go back into place, either through the manipulation of the the electromagnetic charge that are in the body, which needle are particularly good at pulling out. Either even massage will have an impact on, okay, I'm helping the circulation of the fluid, and therefore that circulation may be able to get the rest of the organ to now function better, and so on. Qi mission will have an impact on supporting, again, through part of that electromagnetic layer, part of the infrared magnetic wave, the heat that it produces to create um, vasodilation, better circulation, the body relaxing into it, the triggering the parasympathetic, which is an essential part of healing for any kind of therapy. There was, I think, in the around 2015, 2016, a TED talk that became very viral about this doctor who started to research historical of medicine of spontaneous healing, and she said the body can heal anything because there's history of healing any kind of issue, even from cancer, from any of the other anything that we can think of, up to like the 1920s in medical records. The one thing that's essential is the ability to return to parasympathetic, and up to a certain point, the belief that the person is going to heal, that
right.
the person themselves believe that they're going to heal regardless of the treatment. Um,
Absolutely.
in a sense, that approach should almost be the first one that the medical system try. Of
For
course, if
sure.
somebody is in an emergency situation, that doesn't apply. But before you start to jump too quickly into the extreme kind of treatment, is there a way to get the person to trigger their normal healing system first,
Right.
as long as they're in a safe zone and there's a time buffer that won't kill them if we try that for too long?
Right. Right.
Um,
Right.
so, but starting with this, and then if it doesn't work, then we can go into something else and build it
Yeah.
up and support them. Um, yeah, and that also brings the notion of preventive medicine that's sorely lacking in our modern day,
Oh my
where
gosh. Yeah.
Qigong can have an amazing position for that. In the
Right.
practice, the daily support, I mean, it's better to do some exercise than none. So people who don't do any exercise and start to do Qigong will gain benefits regardless of how they practice, because they'll be moving better.
So let's just, as we wind this up,
Mm-hmm.
I know that you offer classes online.
Mm-hmm.
You have a website. So what is the easiest way of for someone to get in touch with you, and for what different reasons can they get in touch with you?
Mm-hmm.
Um, if they're interested in learning Qigong or coming to you for treatments or
Mm-hmm.
apprenticing in the method.
Yes, thank you. So I have kind of two websites. One that I need to redo, which is more the front window, which is Qigong 18 with the number 1 and 8.com. And from there, there's a contact form. So if they have a question or anything, they want to reach out to me, they can do that through there. And then there's more my course platform, which is the same Qigong 18 with 1.8 dot online, where I have Taiji Qigong Shibashi master course, which is 40 hours of um, 5 to 15 minutes edited video that came out of a 80-hour teacher training course I did with a group of acupuncturists. So there's tidbits of Chinese medicine involved in it, more for general knowledge. It doesn't have to be for acupuncturists, but for those who like that, there's some extra layer of it. It's the most extensive course on set one out there. uh, 40 hours takes quite a bit to go through, but it's yeah, the course was over a 10-month period, so it took a while to build it up, and it takes someone who doesn't know the form to learn the basics of the form, start to understand the biomechanics, start to understand the breath, and dive in the second layer on the feeling of qi and how it develops through simpler sensation up to reaching for someone who already has micro, macro cosmic orbit and what they can notice as they're practicing it. Um, so this is kind of the main course I have. I'm working on editing set two. So I'll have the same thing for the second set of Professor Lin system, and eventually set three and set eight. Set three is already fully recorded. Set eight, I'm recording this year with the same group of students that's been growing for the past 4 years with me. So people can see also the evolution of questions. The students are not in the videos. I keep it where it's just myself, but whenever there's a good discussion, I kind of keep the question in written and then I give my answer. So people can get as much explanation and understanding through the system as I can. It's the second best thing to taking one-on-one classes with me, because I did that in this way.
Wow.
And then, yeah, one-on-one, of course, is for people who want the better quality of feedback. Um, at some point, anyone should have one-on-one training with a teacher, regardless who's your teacher, because that's when you can really get direct feedback of your blind spot, of the thing that you think you understood that you didn't quite understand. And the better teacher will even be able to find the one thing that's blocking you that will just seems to magically fix everything. A good teacher develops such an understanding of reading the body, and maybe that's also part of the evaluation, the medical qigong side. But when you develop this quality of observation, and it's something you need also as a martial artist, especially when you do more combative and sparring, you want to find the weakness of the person so that you can drive through and win. In the medical side or the teaching side, finding that same weakness is how to help the person fix it so everything becomes better. So we're seeking the same thing, we just use it differently depending on the situation.
Mm-hmm.
And so helping the person improve completely their movement, understanding the feeling inside and so on, requires that one-on-one layer for people to build this relationship. And so through that mix of both the pre-recorded and the one-on-one, I have a teacher training certification, which is skill-based. So people can get all of the basic information through the pre-recording video, so we don't spend 40 hours seeing each other. And then they get a base of 10 hours of one-on-one classes. And usually for most people through that time, they reach the minimum level that I want to see for set one. Set one is already widespread. There's a lot of people who already been practicing it for a while. So when they come to me, they don't need as in-depth of training, because there are
Right.
most people that find me usually have like 5 to 10 years already, and sometimes 20 or 30 years of practice, and they just want to get the specificity. So that can go a lot faster than somebody who's just starting from scratch. If somebody is starting from scratch and they need a bit more support, then we can take a few more one-on-one classes until they reach the level that I want to see for a Taiji Qigong Shibashi Set 1 teacher.
Well, I'm going to do your course, so all you listeners out there know I don't know this method, and I want to learn it. And Fabrice is the man to learn it from. So please accept me as a humble student. I would
With
love it.
pleasure, my friend. Yeah, definitely.
Fabrice, thank you so much for your time. It's been really wonderful chatting with you tonight. You've given us so much information, so much depth and detail about Qigong and Shibasha and Professor Lin and the process of learning and developing it and the feeling of Qi and the definitions that are important for it. And I'm really grateful, and I know our viewers will be too. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. It's been wonderful. You're a great host and really enjoyed the discussion, the fluidity. So we'll have to continue off camera to keep chatting together much more.
Sounds great.